So where we left off, we had SubKiller. We added menus. Sorry, not menus. We added a slider. We had a score. This is what it looked like, but we didn't have any functionality. So I could go like this, and I could even drop in score, and nothing would happen. So our goal is to make it so that we actually have some functionality here. So when I click here, that this speeds up, and that when I score, it'll actually increment this score here. And then next we'll add some menu buttons like restart, which will refresh everything, do an about menu, and then a quit. Okay, so let's think about what we have to do then. So first thing is we have to have some kind of listener, right? So some kind of listener that pays attention to whenever I change this. Remember, this is a slider, and sliders do not fire action events. Sliders fire change events. So we want to go to our listener and add the ability to listen on change events. So it's going to implement the ChangeListener interface. Okay, so let's go to our listener class and let's make it implement the ChangeListener interface. Okay, so implement that and add the method which is necessary, which is state changed. State changed. All right, now, so what do we have to do here? What is the goal of state change going to be doing here? Well, we want to increase the speed. All right, increase the speed. Who is keeping track of the speed? Well, we don't have anything keeping track of the speed right now. One way we could do it, if we think about it, is to just take this submarine and draw it a little bit more, a little bit faster. Okay, so I guess I could put it in the submarine class, but think about who's in charge of drawing the submarine. It's not the submarine itself. It is the panel, right? The panel, this game SubKiller panel, has a bomb, a boat, and a submarine, and it's going through, and actually in its pink component, you can see it's drawing all of these. And so what we'll do then is let's add an instance variable called SubSpeed. Okay, here, private, oops, private int SubSpeed, and we'll set that to be 1. Okay, and then we'll just say, okay, if it's 2, I'll draw it twice instead of once. If it's 3, I'll draw it 3 times. So I'll just draw it that many times. So when I go here to sub.draw, let's just do a little for loop. And so for int I equals 0, I is less than subspeed, let's just draw the sub. So in other words, if subspeed is 2, I'll draw it twice, and the net effect will be it'll just go faster based on that speed. Whether that's harder is debatable, but this is just a little exercise in making some changes. Okay, so now that we have that ability, now we have this functionality, but the problem is this is a private method, as it should be. We have no way to access this or modify it yet, right? The listener needs a way in, an interface in to modify this speed. So let's go ahead and generate, or we could just type up a setter. I don't even think we need a getter. So let's just write it by hand. Public void set subspeed int speed. So subspeed equals speed. Okay, so now we have a way for that listener to do something. So let's go over here to state changed. And so, so there's a few things here. Remember, there's a couple ways to do this. We can either grab the source, which is the object, or we can grab the string, the action command. There's a few things, though, a few tricks we can do, so I'm just going to put them in here. So I'm going to use the get source. I'm actually going to get the object itself. So e.getSource, see, that returns an object. So if I want that, let's just say jslider source equals And I can't quite do that. I'm going to have to actually typecast this as a J slider, right? Because otherwise it just thinks it's an object. And I'm also going to have to import that. Okay. All right, so I've got this slider. So I've got a reference to the slider itself. And so there's a few just tricks here. You can say something like if source is get value is adjusting. So what does this do? It just says ignore all the kind of halfway points if it fired off in between or something like that. So in other words, only once they have stopped adjusting slider. Only once they have stopped adjusting the slider should I go into this if block. And so we'll grab that. Difficulty level equals, and again, what we can do is we do source.getValue. Because it's a slider, it's a little bit different. We have a get value. And then we can just use that now. So we can say GamePanel dot set SubSpeed to be this new difficulty level. Okay, so let's see what happens here. Got this. So if I click here, set to be here. So I'd like to say this was on purpose, but no, I tend to forget things too, so this is a good practice in debugging. So I'm thinking, you know what, it's not increasing the speed actually, so what could be the problem? If I go to the panel, perhaps it's not actually setting the subspeed, right? So this guy is setting the subspeed to be 2 or 5 or whatever. So if I go here, I put a little system.out into subspeed. Let's make sure it's getting adjusted. So if I go to the console, it's printing out 1. If I click here or here, it's still printing out 1. So there's a thing, I'm thinking, you know what, subspeed is not getting set. Even though I have a method that's properly written, this is properly written, and I've just forgotten one of the basic things when using listeners, and that is we have got to add the registration. So I forgot the registration of the listener. Now, a key difference here, though, we've got all these listeners on the game panel, but if you remember, which this guy, of course, is not going to, if you remember, this is not the game panel, this is the score panel. So we need a little bit of adjustments here. So the listener is not going to just listen in on a SubKiller panel. It's going to also listen in on a score panel. So once I've got that, I could say something like ScorePanel dot. Now the score panel, I need to say, all right. Let me think about this. The score panel is a J panel, right? So if I try, let me try add ChangeListener. That doesn't work. Let's think about that. I don't know what that is. So why can't I do that? Because score panel is a J panel, right? J panel does not generate change events, right? Just like it doesn't generate action events. Think to yourself, who is generating the actual change event? It's not the J panel. It's not this outer thing here, right? It's not this thing here, right? It's this right here. It's the slider inside this guy. So how am I going to do that? Again, we have to reach inside. We have to provide ways to grab a reference to that J slider. So what we need to do is we need to add an accessor method, a getter, to the score panel. Okay, we need a way to get to that slider. So let's go into ScorePanel. And so one issue we see here is that this slider is a local variable inside the constructor. That's fine and dandy, except if I want to add a getter. So let's come out of the constructor here. If I tried to do something like public J slider get slider, the problem is this slider is out of scope, right? I want a reference to this guy, but look, it lives and dies inside the constructor. So whenever you have a problem like that, all you gotta do is copy this and make it a instance variable, a member variable. So kind of a higher level here. So I remove the J slider part here, I put it up here, and now it's more of a global variable, which is, you know, not desirable if you have no reason for it, but when you have a reason for it like now, it's perfectly fine. So now I can just say return slider. All right, and again, why do we need a reference to that? Because in my listener class, the score panel does not generate the change events, right? We need to have, again, the form is component dot add xx listener, and then the listener, right? Who is the component that generates? Not the score panel, but now I have a way to get in there. I can say ScorePanel dot get slider. That's the component dot add ChangeListener. Notice how it lets me do that now. All right, and who is the listener? It's this. Okay, now I've got that listener registration. Let's see. Oh, yes. Our error is because we, now that we've added a new form of, in our listener class, we have this constructor that takes in a score panel as well. We should do the same thing when we're actually creating the listener, right? The listener no longer just takes in a SubKiller panel. It has to take in a score panel. So I'm going to paste this right here and say, all right, listener, you're going to listen in on not only the SubKiller panel, the content, but you're also going to listen in on the score panel, right? It's going to have references to both. Now, if we run it, it's still not actually going to be working properly. And the reason for that is if I go down to the panel class and I look here, the draw method for all these guys simply draws it on the screen. But I made a change from last year. The update for new frame is what is really going to be driving different animations, right? That's all the calculations of the new coordinates. So what we want to do is we want to have the sub, the one that goes faster, calculate some new coordinates for every slider that we tick. If I click 5, I want it to calculate 5 times faster than these guys' new coordinates. And so let's have it draw once, just on its own, and then for everything above that, so if the speed is, let's start at 1 then. So if the speed is 2, it'll calculate it once, and if the speed is 3, it'll do this twice. Let's add a sub.update for new frame. So it's just saying, okay, no matter what, draw it once, and then anything beyond that, like if it's 2, 3, 4, 5, do all this extra calculation. So this is kind of cheesy and probably not the best style, but let's see if that will give us what we want. So it'll always draw it once. So if it's just on a 1, it doesn't do anything extra. If it does 2, okay, it's going to do double, 3, 4, 5. Now we notice one little thing, and this is not huge, but you notice every time I switch this slider, it deactivates it. And so that's something that we should think about. Okay, on my slider change method, let's go to that real fast. On the listener class, go to the slider state changed. Notice that after I set the speed, a nice thing from the user's perspective would be game panel dot set focus. So let's just set the focus. Request focus in window. So this just has the effect of as soon as I change the state, I don't have to keep clicking backwards. It just does it smoothly like that. Okay, and so now we've got the slider working. So now let's focus on getting this score to update. Right now, if we hit it, nothing actually gets updated. There we go. All right, so let's think about this. So we've got, let's think about who needs to talk to each other. This guy is going to know when the hit occurred, right? so this is like the game panel, right? The SubKiller panel, game panel. This is the score panel. Somehow this guy needs to communicate with this guy that, hey, you need to increment your score here, right? So we need to have some kind of functionality where this guy can talk to this guy. Okay, so let's put a reference to a score panel, to the score panel, inside this SubKiller panel. Okay, so let's go into the SubKiller panel class again. And inside SubKiller panel, let's alter it so that whenever I create a SubKiller panel, I'm going to pass in a score panel, right? So we're just adding more references here. So private score panel. So this guy needs a reference to a score panel, right? Needs a reference to score panel to inform it to increment the score. Okay, so after that then let's alter the constructor to take that in. So score panel S, so I'll just set score panel equal to S, and then now our SubKiller constructor has been altered, so that's going to error out main right now, so we have to fix that to pass that reference in, kind of hook these up a little bit more. Okay, so right now I need to alter the order. I need to create the score panel first so that I have this reference. So I'm going to cut this, paste this, and I'm going to pass in the score panel to the SubKiller panel, right? So now these guys are hooked up, right? Now the score panel can talk to the SubKiller panel, or excuse me, vice versa, so that it can say, hey, you got a point, let's go ahead and increment that score. Okay, now thinking about it further though, where is the exact point in the code, if you think about it? Where is the exact point in the code where we are aware, where we are aware that we got a hit? Where does this like logic take place? Okay, if you think about it, it's not the boat, it's not the submarine, it's actually the bomb class. If you look at the bomb class is the one that knows if it's falling or not, and it knows, and it has this absolute value checking function, right? If the x distance is less than or equal to 36 and the y distance is less than or equal to 21, that's when I know it was a hit. So we need then, here in this spot, right here, right, if there was a hit, we need to somehow increment the score. So now a bomb does not have a reference to any of these guys, but it does have a reference to the SubKiller panel. So right, I've already got this reference here, so this is good. I just need a way then through the panel, so it's kind of like a indirect way. So the bomb tells the panel like, hey, there was a score, and then this panel, this game panel, tells the score panel, hey, there's a score increment. Okay, so it's kind of going through two different things here, but this is good. This is good message passing. So we need to provide a way. So in here we'll say something like game panel dot increment score. But we don't have that yet. So let's go ahead and write this method. Right, we'll provide a public interface so the bomb can tell the game panel, hey, there was a score here. So let's go back to the SubKiller panel. And we're going to provide this way, so we'll just say, okay, public void increment score. All right, again, this way bomb can go through SubKiller panel and have the score updated on the score panel. Okay, so increment score, so bomb did not have a reference to the score panel, right? But this guy, SubKiller panel, does, right? We already added that reference. So we can say score panel dot, okay, so we're going to set the score to the score panel dot get score. Do I have? Oh, I don't have getters yet. Okay, so I need to add those. So my score panel needs getters and setters for the score. So going to ScorePanel now. So public int get score, return score, and I need a setter, public void, set score. So, oops, int s score equals s. Okay, so I provided a way for this guy to change the score. So I can set the score panels to be the old score plus 1. Okay. All right, so if I run this, and if I start the game, still doesn't work. Now, if you might be getting frustrated here, if you system.out this, you could try it. I'm not going to for sake of time though. You would find actually that the underlying data structure would say 1. It would say 1 here. So something is not happening. So what you might try, right, it looks like it's just not updating it to our eyes. So you might be thinking to yourself, okay, so all I need to do then is something like ScorePanel.repaint, right? Unfortunately, this doesn't work. This doesn't work for a score panel. I'm not really updating the score panel. I want to update this right here. What was this again? This was a J label, if you remember. This is a J label. So I want to update the J label, not the J panel, right? So score panel represents this whole thing here, this whole gray thing. I don't want that. I want just this guy right here. And if you remember, there was actually a method that will update what that J label has. And I mentioned it, saying we're going to get to it later. And so that is called set text. I want to use the set text method to update that. Okay. So what I want to do then is I want to get this J label and I want to update it. Okay. Again, we have problems here because we're not inside the ScorePanel class. We're inside the SubKiller panel class. Okay. So no matter, we have a reference to ScorePanel, but remember, ScorePanel itself, it's not. There's no set text for ScorePanel. I have to somehow get the J label right here, and I have not provided that. Okay, so again, we can see this kind of models the kind of thinking we have to do. We have to gradually change stuff. So I made this slider a global variable, and I'm gonna have to do the same thing. I'm gonna have to do the same thing with this J label right here. So I cannot just leave it as a local variable. I have to let's copy this and paste it up here. So by creating it as a global variable, I need to delete this right here. Now, score label is global, which means I can do a little return, a getter or a setter. So I'll do a public J label, get label, which will allow other people to get a reference to that label. What is it called? Score label. Get score label. Okay, so now if I open this up, all right, now I think to myself, okay, so this repaint did not work, right? Because I'm trying to not repaint just the whole score panel, I'm trying to just repaint that. But now I have a way through ScorePanel to say, all right, get score label. So I have a reference to the label now. What do I want to do with that label? I want to set the text, right? Right? We didn't have that access to that method, but now we do. What do I want to set the text as? I want to set it as the old score plus 1, right? So I'll just say, and I've already incremented that, so I'll just say score plus score panel, right? It knows the score dot get score, right? It's already been updated right here. I did set, so I've already incremented here. So again, the internals were already updated. The state was updated, just it wasn't reflected on the outside. Okay, so now if we take a look, okay, so I've clicked here. I can adjust the difficulty, and yep, there it is. So we have updated the slider with the J slider. We've updated this J label. We've hooked everything up so that it responds. We've shown how we often have to add references and getters and setters to communicate across classes when we have larger programs like we will be doing in our second semester project.